What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we're going to be diving into some matchup specific schematics for the Buffalo Bills Week 3 matchup with the Washington Commanders. We are going to be diving into that on the front end of this episode. Player groups, position pieces, coach stuff, anything and everything pertaining to this matchup that'll kind of give us some insight into what this matchup holds for really both teams and what will decide this matchup. On the back end of this episode, we're going to be diving into stock up and stock down after the Bills' Week 2 victory at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. All of these things, front end, back end, advanced metrics, game tape, game film, anything and everything that you have come to expect on this show. As we do here, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns from you folks, maxims, theorems, ideologies, anything you got, throw it up into the chat. I like to get into anything and everything as much as humanly and physically possible, especially as the show rolls on. But as we start here in the beginning of this episode, like I mentioned, we're going to dive into the Bills Commanders matchup for Week 3. And to do that, I am joined by Mr. David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, also co-host of Locked On Bucks. David, I appreciate you taking the time to join me, and welcome to the show.
Oh man, I appreciate the invite. Yeah, looking forward to hopefully a competitive game on Sunday.
So within that vein, we'll dive right into it and start chopping it up with this Week 3 matchup between Bills and Commanders. Let's talk about just kind of, the Commanders sit there at 2-0 right now, a come from behind victory against the Cardinals in Week 1, another come from behind victory, kind of a nail biter in Denver. Just that game was a really fun game to watch. They sit there at 2-0. One of the surprise teams, I feel like a lot of people are labeling that, especially from like a national perspective. But talk about the expectations for the Commanders coming into this season. You got Eric Bieniemy coming in. You got a first-time starting quarterback in Sam Howell. You've got this skill group that is still there that we were talking about offline that just seems to be there year after year on the offensive side. You got some really fun pieces on defense. Talk about the expectation for the Commanders coming into this season and like what did they believe that they could be? What did you think they could be? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, starting off internally, like they feel like they can be a playoff team. You know what I mean? They feel like they can be competitive in the NFC and take advantage of some of the opportunities. The landscape is what it is. The NFC North isn't as strong as it has been in the past. The NFC South is vulnerable. The NFC West even, has kind of a top heavy alignment. So there's certainly opportunities there to be taken advantage of if they can win the games they're supposed to win and win a few games that they're not supposed to win. Right. And a lot of people can look at the roster in a 5th round, quarterback, a rookie a year ago, starting this year. And usually you look at a team like that and you say, okay, this is a team that's either rebuilding or they're just kind of tanking and they'll figure out the quarterback situation next year. But that's not what this locker room is after. This locker room wants to be competitive and they believe they can be competitive. It's why they brought in Eric Bieniemy to be the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator of the team. And he certainly didn't come to Washington to roll over and be anybody's punching bag. So, while the national, outlook on the team all offseason, preseason has been one of the worst teams in the league. I saw Sam Howell was ranked as the worst starting quarterback in the league by some folks. Like that's been the message outside. And honestly, it's not bothering anybody in the locker room in Washington. And I think the first 2 weeks kind of shows that a little bit.
You mentioned a piece right now that we were talking about offline, like the strength and the quality of the locker room or the culture for this team. And it's something, as you and I were going back and forth, we talked about how that's such an important piece for continued success in the NFL, but especially for teams that are kind of like trying to transition from that, kind of irrelevant status to being a regular competitor, whether it's for your division title or from the larger perspective in the conference. Talk about that, strong Commanders culture, that locker room, what you've seen, what you've heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in Washington, it's not just about what you can do on the field. It's about who you are on the field, in the locker room, off the field, all of those things, right? And I mean, you can just start with, Terry McLaurin, arguably the most recognized name and player or name and face on the roster. This is a guy who, I mean, he spent his birthday with children from foster families from Casa, DC. He spent his birthday with boys, girls, big sisters, big brothers, rather. Like this is a guy who he comes in understanding that football is a platform for him to showcase who he is and make an impact as a person versus his person being someone who plays football, if that makes sense. And I got an opportunity to speak to Terry's parents during training camp during one of the hour-long sessions that he does after training camp practices all the time to sign as many autographs, take as many pictures as he can with fans. And I was talking to them, and they're both athletes. Both of his parents are athletes, and they both said the same thing. They're more concerned about him being the right kind of person versus being the right kind of player. But the thing about it is those things go hand in hand. Have a player who is focused on community and what is my greater impact to humanity or the community I'm in, all those things. That's the same kind of person that's also going to worry about what his contribution is to his teammates. You know what I mean? Like that sense of community is really important there. And Terry's the exact type of star receiver you want on a team. If he's got one catch for 1 yard, no touchdowns, and they win, he's through the roof. If he's got 7 catches, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns, and they lose, he's upset. That's the kind of leader you want, and that's the kind of receiving room you now have in Washington with young guys like Jahan Dotson following his lead and De'Ami Brown and Curtis Samuel all kind of following that fold. And really, if you go through the position groups, that is really the sense that they all have is it's what's best for everybody is what's best for me.
That's awesome. And, it's ironically or coincidentally, that's a similar philosophy in which Sean McDermott has operated with this Bills team, and it kind of makes sense why he and Ron Rivera got along so well with their in their tenure at Carolina together. But that's that type of thing, like who you are off the field translates to who you are on the field and in the locker room. And Sean McDermott, wants that, whether it's whatever verbiage you want to use, if it's the sense of community or sense of family, like he's so interested in the character piece and the people piece. And Ron Rivera echoes a lot of those same and or similar sentiments. And so it's really awesome to hear positive things like that for the Commanders. And, I told you offline, Terry McLaurin, I love Terry McLaurin and everything. You just never, no jinx. You just never hear anything bad about Terry McLaurin. Like his work ethic is awesome. The kind of person he is awesome. And then even if you don't care about any of that, and you're just like, I don't care about who they are as people. I want to see what they do on the field. He's tremendous. I legitimately have said for the past couple of years, like if he just got consistency at the quarterback position, he can easily be statistically a top 10, top 5 receiver in the NFL. And we transition to some talk about the Commanders offense this season. Sam Howell, like you mentioned, first time starting quarterback, second year in the league. Eric Bieniemy, well-traveled, well-experienced, but kind of really his first time ever as like a play caller, depending on what you subscribe to with his time at Kansas City and the stories that have come out where he really wasn't calling plays and really wasn't doing this. And some other people, a little bit of a muddy situation over there, but he is the true OC for this Washington team in every sense of the word, calling the plays, designing everything. What are your, again, early sample size, 2 weeks in, but early impressions of this Commanders offense under Eric Bieniemy and first year starting quarterback, but second year QB Sam Howell?
It's a lot of fun, to be quite honest with you. Like Eric Bieniemy came in like a fireball. I mean, the fortunate thing is I'm really good friends well, now he's retired, but a beat reporter in Kansas City. So he covered the Chiefs for a lot of years. And so as soon as as soon as the whispers on the wind started that EB was going to be headed to Washington, he started texting me and kind of give me some insight and some clues into who I was about to be dealing with. And Eric Bieniemy is incredibly direct. He's incredibly honest. And the thing that I like about him the most is that he's willing to understand that he's got flaws. People have flaws. It's not about being perfect. It's about striving for perfection. Right. And a lot of coaches say that, but he's the kind of guy that really tries to enforce it, and if you drop a pass, but your effort was there, your route was clean, and it's just one of those things that happens from time to time, okay, he can live with that. If you drop a pass because you were lazy out of your break and you weren't ready for the ball, that's a totally different story. You know what I mean? And he's a guy who holds up to standards, and his scheme is just incredibly fun. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in training camp we saw routes get unveiled that honestly haven't even been unveiled in the regular season yet, that just make you kind of stand back and say, man, like this is why football is fun. Like this is how football is meant to be played. And the interesting thing about it is his really electric, intense dynamic is almost the complete opposite of Sam Howell, who's just kind of publicly reserved. Like everybody will tell you that when the media is not around, the cameras aren't on, he's a little bit funnier than everybody understands. And I think that's fair for every player. You're a little bit more your real self when the media is not around and fans aren't around. But in the public eye is a very reserved guy, quiet guy, just kind of even keel, never really gets too high or too low on anything. So then you got Eric Bieniemy out here barking at everybody, and you got this cool, calm, collected quarterback, and it's just a really cool dynamic. But then they also get each other, and you see that in the first 2 weeks of the season where the offense comes out against the Arizona Cardinals, and Sam had some mistakes, some turnovers, fumble that led directly to a touchdown. But they go into the locker room, they come out in the second half, and Sam really only threw, a handful of passes in the second half of that game. But they came out and did what they needed to do as an offense to let the defense carry the day and win the game. Then you go to Denver, not the same amount of struggles, but still some struggles. They go into the locker room, and same thing when they come out, they have a new plan, they have a new approach to attacking this Broncos defense, and they go out and do what they need to do as an offense to win the game. But the two styles that they did it in are completely different. And I think that in a nutshell is really engaging about this offense, because if you're Sean McDermott and you're these Bills pro scouts, like you're watching the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are known for, they'll hit you with everything different, on a given week. How much of that was Eric Bieniemy? Well, I don't know how much of it was him at Kansas City, but I can tell you how much he brought with him to Washington, and it's a lot, because if you watch these first two games, the first team you see in week one, as far as an offense is concerned, is completely different from the second team you see. And that tells you that you really don't know how to prepare for this team other than to just look at the weapons and say, how can we best try to mitigate these risks?
I love that point. So again, you and I were talking offline. I watched the tape from this past week 1 against Denver. But I didn't see the week 1 tape yet against Arizona. So I'm interested, elaborate on that point. Talk about the differences in how this offense operated week 1 versus Arizona versus week 2 against Denver. Talk about those pieces.
Yeah, well, I mean, week 1 to week 2, specifically the screen. Week 1, I think the stat service I use counted 3 screen passes, and a little bit of haze on whether or not that's 3 that were executed or 3 that were called, because there were a few screen passes that Sam Howell just didn't execute for whatever reason. Decided to go a different route when there was a screen put on. So there may have been screens called that were not executed, but bottom line is, you got 3 screen passes all of week 1, and then week 2, the Denver Broncos coming out playing a lot of off coverage, trying to contain, guys like Terry McLaurin, even though he did get a 30-yard touchdown on them, try to contain those guys, keep Jahan Dotson from taking the top off the defense. And early on, I think you saw Sam Howell wanted to kind of try to challenge that, wanted to kind of try to push the envelope and test it. But coming out in the second half, I was talking to another colleague out there in the press box, and I kept saying, man, if the Broncos keep playing this off coverage on first down, especially, eventually Sam, EB, combination of the two, they're going to start taking advantage of these opportunities, and you're going to get successful first down plays time after time after time after time. And you're looking at 2nd and 6, 5, 4, 3, whatever it is. And that just gives you the opportunity to be successful on 2nd down, 3rd down. And that's exactly what the Commanders did. And then you just wait and you just jab. You're in a prize fight. You just jab, jab, jab. You wait for your opportunity to take a big shot. That's when you hit Terry McLaurin, 30 yards down the field behind 2 defenders, despite the ball being on a rope. And I know the broadcast described that touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin as an all-pro caliber throw. And I tend to agree with that. Not saying that Sam's going to be an all-pro this year, right? But that's the type of potential that he has as a quarterback. And as he gets more comfortable, those are the types of plays that you're going to be able to see him get into. So if I'm the Buffalo Bills, I look at that and I say, like, the last thing we can do is let Sam Howell get comfortable. And the last thing we can do is just give up 4 yards on every first down play, because that's not a recipe for success. So I expect, even though, I understand that Sean McDermott hasn't been, as blitz happy as some coach, certainly not like a Todd Bowles at in Tampa. I would probably, if I were opposing coach after seeing what I saw these first 2 weeks, I would probably try to bring pressure to Sam and make him make quicker decisions and not let him get those easy 4-yard gains on first downs.
That throw to McLaurin, I clipped it, and Eric got clipped, and I tweeted it out earlier today. It was just like, as I tweeted from the end zone angle behind the Commander offense, just aesthetically beautiful. Like the trajectory of the ball, the spin, McLaurin goes up and gets it, like from start to finish. That play is just gorgeous. And exactly your point. Yeah, if you give Sam Howell that time, you let him see things. He's got such a pretty pass, like what he's capable of uncorking. He did it at Carolina and doing it so far when he's gotten the time here. I also like the point that you mentioned about kind of the jab, 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 and then you go for the haymakers. Because my thought was, watching this Denver tape, seemed like things early on were very kind of like poking and prodding and kind of testing the cage. And then it seemed like, whether it was, as that first half progressed, but especially coming out of halftime, felt like Bieniemy just kind of had, okay, we have our baseline measurables. We know what they
Mhm.
like to do against A, B, and C. Let's go. And that second half was just, we're staying on schedule. We're staying on schedule. Chunk play, stay. It just kind of seemed like whatever they wanted to hit, they did. And they got the deep shot to McLaurin. They started working in different pieces. Like it was, you could tell that there was kind of like a method to the madness, similar to what not to kind of connect it back or whatever, but similar to what Andy Reid usually does with his first like
Mhm.
20 scripted, where things are obviously he's trying to score, but a lot is designed to figure out like what your tendencies are going to be in this game and figuring out your game plan. And once he's got that sample size and that baseline, he attacks and he goes for the throat. So I like that point from you because it kind of matches up with what I thought on my from my notes. So fantastic. And talk about Sam Howell briefly. Again, first 2 games, he can spin it when he gets that time. What are your early return impressions on Sam Howell thus far?
Yeah, he's a young quarterback in the making. You know what I mean? And a lot of it's going to boil down to Eric Bieniemy putting him in situations that allow him to get comfortable, allow him to take advantage of what is happening, and what you kind of just talked about, right? And if you're talking about trying to penetrate someone's defenses, you kind of scout it. You know what I mean? Go in and try. Let's try this outside zone run. Let's see if that does anything. And you know what? Maybe it only got a yard, but maybe we saw something within there that we think we can tweak. And let's try this, inside run and see what goes there. Let's try this screen. Let's try that deep route, and these are all things, like you said, that then you go into the halftime break and you come out with a new plan of action. And it's been really interesting because, and I said this on another show previously, like both games, even though they're vastly different, like Sam Howell barely threw in the second half against the Cardinals, threw a lot more in the second half against the Denver Broncos. But each time they came out of the locker room, the offense looked like it almost had more energy than it did in the first. You know what I mean? And that really could be all it is let's play it safe early. Let's let our young quarterback get his feet on the ground, get used to the crowd noise, get used to the environment. You know what I mean? And even a home environment. I mean, your listeners know, like Buffalo Bills fans notoriously great at traveling to away games. So I expect a lot of blue to be in that FedEx Field Stadium on Sunday. So let's let Sam get used to, you're in your home stadium, but you might hear a lot of, let's go Buffaloes or what have you. And so let's get used to that. Let's go back to the locker room. And again, let's come out rejuvenated and ready to fight. Now, against Denver, they kind of had to turn it up a little bit faster than I think they expected to. That touchdown pass to Logan Thomas is something that I saw them working on during practice a lot. And so when they kind of got down there to that area, I kind of nudged the media member next to me. I said, remember that back end zone throw that they were working on? And she was like, yeah, I said, we might be seeing that here. And sure enough, it was 2 plays later, you saw that back end zone throw.
Yeah.
It was a little bit shallower than they were working on in practice, but it was the same effect. And, those kinds of things are the things that they kind of keep in their back pocket, ready to unleash when they need it. And I think they needed it a little bit earlier than they expected to, but it could help get them rolling. And that, 4th down touchdown conversion, I mean, that's a huge play in any game, let alone a 2-point win.
Absolutely. And it was, again, they showed their mettle and kind of coming from behind and staying poised and calm and executing as that game went on, and they got themselves another win. Let's flip it to the other side of the ball. The Commander defense, which has really, I mean, despite the struggles for the offense the past several years and what they've lacked with quarterback play, the Commanders defense has been kind of a strength year in and year out, especially from a front perspective. And again, like you and I were talking offline, Washington is tied for the league lead in so all this data is per Sports Info Solutions. They're tied for the league lead in combined sacks. They are first in sack percentage. They're fourth in total pressures. They're 12th in pressure percentage. They're tied for second in knockdowns. Also, from a coverage perspective, they have the 6th lowest EPA per pass play given up, behind only the Browns, Cowboys, 49ers, Saints, and Bills. Talk about this Commanders defense, which got another injection of quality player this past week with Chase Young coming back. Good to see him, finally working through. Dude is so talented, and it just sucks when you see guys that are that talented just struggle with injuries. But so you've got Young, you've got Sweat, you've got Jonathan Allen, you've got what Payne can do. We talked, again, I keep saying this, I'm a broken record. If you had talked offline on your bingo card, you're crushing it this one. What Abdullah Anderson has been this year. So just talk about this Commanders defense, strengths, weaknesses, whether it's players, schematic pieces, because it's a quality group they have on that side of the ball, despite, because I think some people are going to look at the score from this past week and be like, oh, Denver put up a ton of points on them, but they're a group that gets after it. They sacked Russ 7 times this past week. They got a squad on that side of the ball. So just elaborate on that grouping.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of it kind of reminds me of this is a kind of a far off reference, but the year that the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, they lost to the Chiefs in the regular season. And but if you go back and actually watch that game, right, get out of the stat box and go watch the actual game, what you would see is the Kansas City Chiefs dominated the first quarter of that game. The Buccaneers won the next 3 quarters. The problem is the Chiefs won the first quarter by so much that the Buccaneers couldn't come back enough to get a win anyway. But what you saw in the Super Bowl was all a product of that first game. What the Buccaneers learned in those last 3 quarters of that loss is what sparked the dominating win they had in the Super Bowl. And so when you look at the Broncos and you look at the Commanders and you say, okay, it was a 2-point win. The Broncos put up a good amount of points. That's true. But when you cut on the tape, and I think if you go from like 9 minutes, 7 seconds left in the second quarter on, it's a completely different game. If you watch the first chunk of that game, you see one thing. You watch the last chunk of that game, it's a completely different game. And outside of that Hail Mary, which, is an issue all its own that they'll address with players trying to get interceptions at the end of the game instead of knocking the ball down. Outside of that, you know what I mean? It's really not as close as the scoreboard shows. And again, you just talk about the adjustments, but now we can flip to Jack Del Rio, right? And this defense, I mean, by and large, a lot of these players have been with Jack for years and years and years. They're in like their 80th week of install at this point in time. So they know what they want to do. They know how they want to do it, and they know the best way to get it done. It's a matter of going out there and actually doing it. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that this team came into the Denver Broncos game thinking that, Danger Russ really isn't all that dangerous anymore and all these other things. But it certainly looked like a unit that maybe just was a little bit, feeling themselves a little bit. And honestly, when you see that happen and you see a unit or a team that feels really good about themselves get punched in the mouth a little bit, it's good for them, and hopefully what's going to happen is this team. I mean, you're obviously going to take the Buffalo Bills serious anyway. Nobody's going to sleep on the Buffalo Bills, but having that experience now hopefully just energizes this group even more because they know what they're capable of. And you talk about those 7 pressures and realize not is it just 7 pressures from Chase Young specifically in the entire game. It's basically 7 pressures in the last 2.5 quarters of the game. You know what I mean? And then Montez Sweat and his sacks and 7 sacks on Russell Wilson. Like all of this stuff really took place in the span of about 2.5 quarters. So when you put it in that light, is a very dominant defensive performance that was predicated by a very sloppy defensive performance.
Yeah, it was impressive to watch them, again, offensively and defensively, but just really start to get after it. And, they were giving up chunk plays early on and kind of being misled with misdirection and play action from Denver. And then it was just like that proverbial, switch got flipped and all of a sudden the light bulb turned on and they got after it and just, again, flip the switch and put things into overdrive against the Denver Broncos. David, I know you got to skedaddle. I appreciate the hell out of you for joining me. Tremendous insight into the Commanders. The floor is yours. Anything and everything. Where can people find you? Your work, your platforms, all that stuff. I always like to tell everybody who watches the show. Obviously, they're Bills fans, but football fans in general. And it's always good to stay up on every other team in the league because every other team is your enemy, and you're one of the good ones covering Washington. So the floor is yours. Whatever you got, you got.
Oh, I appreciate you. I appreciate the invite again. Looking forward to this game. I spent 4 years stationed at Fort Drum, New York, at the end of my Army career. So I've got a lot of friends that are Bills fans, and I've had a lot of good experiences around Bills fans during those years and catching some games up there. And so I always get really excited whenever the Bills play a team that I cover. Locked On Commanders 5 days a week on Twitter, DHarrison82, Locked On Bucks as well. That's a 5-day-a-week show. I'm on it about 3 days a week. But that's also out there. I know the Bucks are playing the Bills this year. As well. I actually might be in Buffalo for that game. I might be able to cover that game. We'll see how the schedules work out. But man, just looking forward to it. I appreciate the invite. And I can't say like go Bills or anything, but I have a special place in my heart for Bills fans. So I appreciate all of you guys.
No, we appreciate you, man. You were tremendously gracious. And then, the level and knowledge and insight and everything you offered was tremendous and everything that I hoped it would be. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and busy schedule. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night, and I'll see you around, and I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Later, man. Really fun guest, Mr. David Harrison. Yeah, he was somebody who I was excited to have on the show and dive into the schematic pieces. And normally I like to have the guests on for a little more, like 30 to 45. You can only do like to 20 to 25. And you know what? I figured, some quality is better than quantity of others. It's kind of like that episode of The Office where everybody can't figure out, or Michael can't figure out if they're supposed to get Alfredo's Pizza Cafe pizza or pizza by Alfredo. And he asked, like, would you rather have a ton of crappy pizza or a smaller amount of really good pizza? And everybody unanimously is like, oh, a smaller amount of really good pizza. That's what David was in this episode. Give him a follow. He was tremendous. We're going to keep staying on this conversation and talking point right now when it comes to the schematic components that will decide Bills versus Commanders. Again, a lot of insight that he offered into what this team is, again, as he regularly covers them and breaks them down. So I dove into the tape in preparing for this episode and this week, and I'm going to continue to dive into the Arizona game, the week 1 game for Washington going forward. So follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. I'll be having more breakdowns and clips and pieces going forward. But like I mentioned with David there, this is a quality group, and it starts with a lot of the advanced metrics that I wasn't expecting to see. So again, some of the ones that I rattled off as we talked about the defense there. They have the 6th lowest, again, as a pass coverage unit. They have the 6th lowest EPA per pass play given up, behind only the Browns, Cowboys, 49ers, Saints, and then the Buffalo Bills. And if you hear those team names, I think you say, based on how this season has gone so far, you know what the Browns did in week 1 to the Bengals, and Bengals kind of falling apart, but that's a conversation for another time. What the Browns did in week 1, what the Browns did in week 2 from a defensive standpoint, what the Cowboys have done both weeks, what the 49ers have done, how good that Saints defense is, and then what the Bills defense has done in past 2 weeks. You know how good those defensive units are from a coverage standpoint and what they do, how well coached they are, and the schematic pieces that they have. I don't think anybody's putting in the Commanders or thinking like, oh yeah, they're probably 6 behind those other groups ahead of them. That's a really quality spot for them to be in. And then again, you talk about that front, what they have. Tied, all data here per Sports Info Solutions, they are tied for the league lead in combined sacks with 10. They sacked Russell Wilson 7 times in week 2. They are first in sack percentage at 30.3. They are 4th in total pressures with 38. They're 12th in pressure percentage at 39.4. They're tied for 2nd in QB knockdowns. And then this is a fun stat for them. There are 233 qualifying edges and interior defensive linemen for pass rush productivity per PFF. They have 3 players in the top 19 out of that 233 for pass rush productivity. Chase Young is 4th. He played only 1 game. He missed week 1. He's recovering from injury. He played week 2 against Denver. And like David said, he had 7 pressures in that game against Denver. And those 7 pressures really came from about midway through that second quarter on. So Chase Young is 4th out of the 233 qualifying players up front in pass rush productivity. There are other interior defensive player not named Deron Payne, not named Jonathan Allen. Abdullah Anderson, he's tied for 7th. And then you have edge Montez Sweat, who is 19th. And then again, you still have Jonathan Allen. You still have Deron Payne. These pieces up front that can really get after it. This is a grouping that has done well. I think year over year, Jonathan Allen got a big contract this past year. Chase Young was a top tier pick. Again, he's had a bunch of injury concerns and pieces. Montez Sweat is a quality guy. This is a very interesting matchup piece because what we saw in week 2 for the Bills versus the Raiders, Max Crosby, all pro caliber guy. I talked about him last week. I showed tape of him last week here on the show. And I mentioned him as, depending on how you define underrated, but if it's how good a player is versus how much they're talked about nationally, I thought Max Crosby, I think Max Crosby is the most underrated player in the NFL. The Bills completely neutralized him. Spencer Brown, I think, still had overall a Spencer Brown game, but Ken Dorsey and Aaron Kromer, really good game plan coming in. They chipped him almost felt like every single pass play, whether it was with Knox, whether it was with Kincaid, whether it was with the running backs, whether it was with the running back coming out of the backfield, whether it was with, going out in that 5 wide spread look with the 2 chippers on each end of the tackles, kind of bookending the line of scrimmage. Like, they found ways to neutralize Crosby with quick game, with chip help, just in a variety of ways. That was a huge matchup piece for me going into week 2 was Max Crosby against Spencer Brown. They neutralized him. Now, going into this game, Jonathan Allen is up there in terms of that tier of player that can absolutely wreck a game like Max Crosby. But this defensive line is much more similar to what the Jets rolled out in week 1 than it is with the Raiders. Other than Crosby, the Raiders didn't really have much up front going into last week, and I think the game showed it. The stat that I brought into last week's game or last week's episode was the Raiders had 10 pressures in week 1 against the Denver Broncos. Crosby had 6 of them. They really didn't have anything besides him, and you saw that in that game against the Bills. They really didn't get a lot of pressure. There wasn't anybody really affecting the game. Tyree Wilson, the rookie, the high-pick rookie out of Texas Tech, he still really hasn't put his pass rush plan and moves together yet. So there wasn't anybody other than Crosby. The Bills just had to neutralize him. Going into this game against the Commanders, there are several players on this squad. Again, you don't just, as a group, hit the metrics and the numbers that I mentioned earlier in terms of what they've done thus far this year in the first 2 weeks. You don't do all that if you don't have a quality group up front. And even more so, now they brought back Chase Young. So this is a group that can get after it in the pass game. I'm going to talk about the run game in a minute, but it's a group that can test you in a variety of ways. They can get pressure on the interior. They can get pressure off the edge, and they can do it with 4. And they have the ability to just play coverage behind it and drop 7 into coverage. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they do have a very quality defensive line. And if Chase Young can be Chase Young, this is a group that's up there in terms of some of like the best defensive line production that you can see this year. So this group is much closer to the Jets level than the Raiders were. Again, you just really had Crosby. You didn't have that type of consistent threat anywhere else on the defensive line for the Raiders. But for Washington, you have it at both edge spots. You have it on the interior from multiple guys. They have a good rotation. There's a legit 3, 4, 5 guys on Washington's front that can get after it. That's a huge piece. Now, I like where Dobbs' head is at. He says run the ball. So that is a piece that I would like to see from this Bills team going into it. Again, I mentioned it last week on the episode going into that Raiders game. Oh, I got to stop because we got a super chat. We got a super chat from Save a Whale, Ride a Running Back. I really love the name, and I appreciate the donation, and I appreciate you being here as well. Thank you very much for the super chat, and thank you very much for the donation. I don't know. I feel like if you just wanted to throw out a super chat and donation, that's awesome. But I feel like maybe there was supposed to be a comment attached to it. So if you do have a comment coming after, you don't have to give a super chat again, but put your comment into the comments and I'll pull it up. Because I know sometimes it can be wonky with like attaching the comments to the super chat, but I appreciate you. And your name is fantastic. Thank you very much. So looking at this defensive front, where's that piece from? Dobbs. Dobbs said run the ball. So yes, I think it starts with the run the ball mantra for this Bills team. I'm going to continue to say it every week. Some of it is tied to the Josh Allen pass game. I thought what was an interesting piece for the Bills in this game against the Raiders coming out of halftime. I forget who the sideline reporter was, but she mentioned talking to Josh McDaniels at halftime. And he said something to the effect of, we were trying to force Josh Allen to be patient in the first half. He was. Now we need a different game plan. Some semblance of that. I'm paraphrasing. That's the world that I think Josh Allen and the Bills offense, defensively from an opponent standpoint, that's the world they are going to continue to live in. Teams are going to continue to play this off coverage. They're going to continue to try and tempt Josh Allen or bait him into becoming kind of erratic, frantic, error-prone, inefficient Josh Allen. They're going to sit back and give him the underneath, give him those efficient, on-schedule type of throws, and sit back and say, we don't think you will continue to stay on schedule. We don't think you will continue to stay patient and stay efficient. They're sitting there thinking eventually that, Mr. Hyde to his Dr. Jekyll, they're thinking that eventually that other side of Josh Allen is going to rear its ugly head and he's going to start forcing the ball downfield and start pushing the ball downfield. Whether that means turnovers, whether that just means incompletions and getting your team behind the sticks, whether it means trying to, make those Superman or unicorn plays when he does not need to and does not have to. The Raiders tried that. They went in with that game plan saying, let's see if he can be efficient. Let's see if he can take what's given to him and stay on task and stay on schedule throughout the game. Allen did that. He had a couple, Josh Allen moments, but I think they were more calculated. And I think he did a good job of knowing when to go with a riskier play with a more calculated risk. And that had like a higher potential yield for a reward. I thought he did a very good job against the Raiders with that. Myself and Eric Turner are going to be breaking down all of it tomorrow night in the Cover One film room. But that's a piece that teams are going to continue to do. They're going to continue to see if Josh Allen can live in that world of efficiency and taking what's given to him. And then if you compare that as a defense with a front four that can get after him and generate pressure, allowing you to consistently drop 7 into coverage so that way you always have the numbers advantage in coverage, that's a recipe that has worked in the past against Josh Allen. So I anticipate Washington doing similar or having a similar game plan to what the Raiders had in terms of kind of keeping everything in front of them and see what you can do. This is the defense that the majority of their coverage snaps this year, their most played coverage on the year is cover 2. Their second most played coverage on the year is cover 3. Their third is cover 1, but their primary modes right now of coverage at this point are those off coverages, those zone coverages. They're going to try and keep everything in front of them. They're going to see if Josh Allen will stay on schedule, if he'll take what's given to him. And that's what he did against the Raiders, but it also worked with the run game that the Bills had. So having that downhill run presence, which we're going to talk about as we go forward here in this episode, I think it starts with running the ball against this Commanders team. 1, because I think you can get after them when it comes to running the football, but 2, it pairs very well with how Josh Allen needs to live based on how defenses are approaching him and this Bills offense. And when it comes to the run game in specific, Denver had a lot of success going with heavier personnel. So whether it was, 21 personnel or 12 personnel, and they had success going with those heavy groupings and then running gap scheme runs, power, counter, crack toss. All those runs had success. I think the Bills can continue to see success with duo. That downhill running game that they used a ton against the Raiders, creating that vertical displacement, allowing James Cook to read that front side linebacker and either take it up the gut or press it and push it to the outside and put himself one-on-one with a safety or a corner, depending on how the defense is chosen to align. I want to see the Bills use gap scheme runs against this team. Washington as a defense, when they got gouged, it was with runs or passes that had some semblance of misdirection or some semblance of extra processing that came. Oh, got to stop. Save a whale, right? A running back with another super chat. I appreciate you. Thank you for still being here. Thank you for another super chat. And thank you for the comment. He says, sorry, forgot a message. Concerned this past game plan won't be as easy running. You just stated this, I think. Go Bills. I appreciate you. Yeah, I think that's the one caveat with how successful the Bills' offense was in this game against the Raiders. And we'll know more going forward once there's more sample size. But I don't think when it all shakes out, I don't think this Raiders defense is going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. I don't think they have a ton of talent aside from Max Crosby. Potentially long-term, they might. But between their coverage schemes that they play and the talent that they have, I don't think putting 38 points up on the Raiders is very nice in a response from how you played in week 1 against the Jets. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to be sitting here saying man, that was a tremendous performance against a tremendous defense. So I don't think anything, passing the football, running the football, pass protection, I don't think any of that is going to be as easy this week against Washington that it was against the Raiders, which is a fair point. And you have to adjust your game plan every week, right? But whether it's running the football, pass protection, executing in your route concepts, I think all of those things will be moderately to significantly more difficult against this Commanders defense, which can really get after it, especially in comparison to what the Raiders defense offers. But I appreciate you. And good comment. Thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you very much. Again, so if we want to attack this Commanders defense, I was about to say Raiders, this Commanders defense, doing things that will put their processing into overdrive. So again, it could be something as simple as running a gap scheme run where you're pulling a backside guard and tackle, or you're pulling the backside guard and an H-back or fullback, and you're running a little GH counter, or you're running power, something where you're changing gaps. You have that flash of color moving from one side to another. It could be play action. It could be split zone. Anything that causes them to have to process, read, and react and communicate, that is where you want to put this Washington defense. You can confuse them when they go into their match coverages. You can confuse them with their match coverages if you use motion, if you motion into bunches and or trips. Again, why? You motion into those, and then whether you're running some switch releases or you're running different angles, you put their defenders in a situation where they have to communicate and they have to be accurate with their rules. Okay, those match coverages are predicated on, if wide receiver 1 does this, you do this. If wide receiver 1 does that, you do that. All these pieces. And they have to read and react in the moment accurately, and the rest of their peers have to read and react in that moment accurately as well. What you saw with Washington was, in the game against Denver at least, when they were put in those situations, you had guys not passing off correctly. You had guys covering the same receiver downfield and kind of blowing coverages, and having guys running vacant and running open in the intermediate, allowing chunk plays for the Denver offense. So you want to put them in situations where you can cause chaos with their match coverages or force them to communicate in their pass offs. And again, even if it's not a match coverage type of zone, it could be a regular spot drop zone. We saw things in this Denver game for Washington where even if it was just a basic, you're running mesh, and I think everybody knows what mesh is at this point, but I'm just going to articulate in case you don't. So basically, you just got two drag routes, kind of one going under the high underneath, one in the low underneath, and then you usually have a sit route behind that, and you're just trying to cause somebody to get stuck in the wash, kind of get stuck in traffic. And you really didn't have Washington defenders getting stuck on one another. It was more just failure to communicate and pass off. Someone's coming on the drag and the linebacker's calling out, hey, that's your man, that's your man. And the apex defender on the other side is already bailed out. And all of a sudden that underneath drag route is going from right to left. And that ball's being completed on the left. And there's about a 10-yard radius where there is no Washington defender. Again, put them into pieces where they are forced to communicate, they're forced to pass off in coverage, or if it's from a run perspective, where they are forced to adjust on the fly. And I got to stop because we got super chat. Thank you very much. Jason, you're always here. I appreciate the hell out of you. And thank you very much for the super chat. And Jason says, I don't have a cool name like the last guy, but here's $5. Tell Kendall we miss him and all wish him good luck in his middle school spelling bee. I'm going to screenshot this and then I'm going to text it to him after the episode. You're fantastic, Jason. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Dave, who I talked on Twitter to last week. Appreciate you, Dave, for being here again. Dave says, so you can't just let them pin their ears back and get after it. Make them think. Absolutely. They are an aggressive defense. They're going to penetrate. But I also think some of just their roster makeup and how they process, you can just take advantage of that. So again, anything that involves flashes of color, misdirection, things where you have to read one thing and it's not that thing, and then you have to adjust. So under center play action where defenders are coming forward and all of a sudden they realize, it's not a run, it's a pass. Let me turn around, figure out who's going in the route distribution and how I have to adjust based off of that. We think it's a run, but we're pulling two linemen or we're pulling one, or it's a counter or it's power, and we're changing gaps. And now I have to figure out, okay, I had this gap before. Now I think I have this other gap. Does that guy know he has a new gap? Are we exchanging? Are we staying? Are we all fitting correctly? They just got taken advantage of in those situations from Denver. They adjusted as the game went on, but they got gouged early on. And I think those concepts and schemes will continue to work. Another piece, force their corners to have to tackle consistently. Another run or gap scheme run that I mentioned earlier was that crack toss run. Get out onto the perimeter and attack Emmanuel Forbes, attack Kendall Fuller, especially. Both of them missed multiple tackles in this past game. What you will see from a cornerback perspective, when they are in their base defense, St. Juste will be one corner and Fuller will be the other. When they shift more into nickel, St. Juste will creep down and be that nickel defender, and Emmanuel Forbes will be that new outside corner. And that's what their three cornerback package will look like when they go into that. But again, put them into situations where they have to communicate and process pre-snap motion, fast motion, switch releases, play action, change gaps on them. I think it's a good heavy gap zone run type of game for them, for the Bills in this game against Washington, to really take advantage of what they are up front. And then within that piece as well, just attack the middle of the field. Like, I don't, no disrespect to what Washington has, but I think from a linebacker perspective, Cody Barton and Jamin Davis are their main two starting linebackers, especially when you go from a nickel perspective. That's who will be in there. You can take advantage of those guys from an athletic standpoint. I think it is a mismatch if you can get Dalton Kincaid on one of those guys or Dawson Knox on one of those guys, based on formation and alignment. We're going to talk about some formation and alignment things when it comes to the Bills 12 personnel package as we go forward. I want to save it for stock up, stock down, but that's a mismatch potential that has mismatch potential in and of itself. Again, especially when defenses choose to match that 12 personnel for the Bills with nickel, and then you take Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid and you attach them both to the line of scrimmage, and now you have a 7-man surface and you're forcing nickel corners or safeties or nickel corners and outside corners and all these guys to be in the box or be involved in that run fit. And then you run downhill. You can mash guys, you can wash guys down, and then that's how you set James Cook up one-on-one on the outside with a corner or a safety. And their angle has to be perfect because James Cook's burst and speed will make somebody wrong in a hurry big time. So overall, again, this Commanders defense, they're a good defense. Tremendous up front. tons of production already through these first 2 weeks. It's a group that I like. There's a lot of good dudes, again, on the defensive line, and even some fun guys on the back end. I like what Emmanuel Forbes could be. I like Jartavius Martin coming out of Illinois. We'll see what happens. I liked Derek Forrest, safety out of Cincinnati from a couple years ago. He's starting for them. Cam Curl can make some plays from time to time. I like St. Juice. So we will see what happens, but it's a good group. I would not be surprised if they sack Josh Allen 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 times. I would not be surprised if they got pressure and Allen had to make some plays on his own and do some Josh Allen things. Again, the Bills are really able to nullify and neutralize Max Crosby this past week, but it's a lot easier when you can just worry about neutralizing one guy than having to neutralize multiple. And Jonathan Allen is a game wrecker on the interior. Chase Young can be a game wrecker off the edge. Montez Sweat isn't necessarily in that game wrecker range, but he is a quality edge player coming off as well. And then again, like I mentioned, you've got guys like Abdullah Anderson, being 7th out of 233 qualifying edges and defensive tackles in terms of pass rush productivity. So they're getting after it, and Chase Young's hitting the ground running after returning back last week for his first game. So it's a quality group up front, but overall from a defensive standpoint, from a front standpoint, and defensive grouping as a whole, you can take advantage of them with anything and everything that has to do where you're forcing them to have to communicate and process. So use motion, switch releases, play action, gap scheme runs, whether it's just your basic downhill piece, which I think really lends itself to the Bills' strength, but also use some more pullers this week. Pull Connor McGovern, pull Spencer Brown or Deion Dawkins, and use more of those dart plays. Put Reggie Gilliam in the backfield and run, some traditional power or some counter, or use Knox and McGovern and run some GH counter and all those types of pieces, right? So anything that changes eyes, makes them have to process, makes them have to think. You're focusing here, but you're seeing a flash of color, so it takes your eyes away. All these things that add to the mental load, that's where you can take advantage of this Washington defense. Make them have to play slower, make them have to process. I think they're inefficient in their processing, in their reading and reacting, and that's where the Bills can really take advantage of them in this game. We got multiple super chats. Jessica with one saying, seems like less RPOs this year. Is that correct? Yes. I don't have the RPO data handy and in front of me, but the one tough thing that can be, well, not one tough thing, but a tough thing that can happen with RPOs. Actually, I'm going to try and pull up that data right now. Since you gave the super chat, it's tough at times because sometimes like you can have an RPO look for something that really isn't an RPO, and you can have an RPO that may not necessarily look like an RPO. The advanced metrics for the Bills offense this year, with a week 2 advanced metrics, are they up yet? No, they're not. So if we're just looking at week 1, the Bills had, again, just week 1 against the Jets, they had a 7% RPO usage rate, which was 22nd. But forget about the ranking. Just think 7%, 7%, 7%. Their RPO usage rate last year was 16%. So a huge difference. I think the percentage will go up after the Raiders game, potentially a little bit. But again, that's going to be based on league-wide trends. But yeah, so I don't have the data for week 2 yet. But if we're just taking from week 1, 16% RPO usage rate last year in 2022 versus a 7% usage rate in week 1 against the Jets. So that is a huge difference. Once I get the numbers for week 2, we'll put that together as well. But that is a huge piece. Well done. Well done. Good question. And good eye, Jessica. I like that. And thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for the super chat. Got another super chat from Dave. Dave, I appreciate you being here again and for the super chat. Dave says, after watching the film, do you think Washington adjusted or did Denver get away from what was working? I think Washington adjusted. It's always going to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? Your success on one side of the ball usually goes hand in hand with the ineptitude of the other side, right? There's always, things are very rarely black and white. There's always some semblance of gray, but I do think Washington adjusted well. And I think honestly, a lot of it too just came from the pass rush up front. They just started winning. Like Daron Payne stopped getting blown off the ball against the run. Jonathan Allen was winning. Chase Young was converting speed to power and driving tackles into the backfield and getting around the edge. Like their pass rush game really started to work. They started to get Denver behind the sticks. And when they got Denver behind the sticks, then they started to play more aggressive on the back end and they were jumping routes. They had a couple interceptions they had a couple plays that should have been interceptions. Forrest, I believe, dropped one deep on a cover 2 rep. I think it was Forrest, but either way, it was a safety who dropped an interception, and then Emmanuel Forbes dropped another interception later. I think they adjusted as the game went on, but I think really honestly up front, they just started to eat. That defensive line started to take over with what you saw from Chase Young and Jonathan Allen and Abdullah Anderson. They just started getting penetration. They started making Russ have to scramble and kind of create more on his own. It really started with that front, and they started to win against the Denver offensive line, and it just drastically changed what Denver was doing. Denver was succeeding with their play action game early on. You saw several deep shots from Russ, including the big one to Marvin Mims. They couldn't really live in that play action game when it's 2nd and 19, 2nd and 17, because they were getting sacked on first down, or Washington was drawing a hold on first down, and all of a sudden it's 1st and 20, and then it's 2nd and 17 because, the run game doesn't work on the next play, or so on and so forth. So I think Washington started to get after it up front, and the game drastically changed. I like what Zach of all trades says here. He says, I'm here. What did I miss, Ant? You missed a lot. Had a tremendous guest in the first portion of the episode. So once this is done, I suggest you go back and watch it. But I like what Zach says here. He says, also smash that like, folks. Yes, please and thank you. If you folks are enjoying this content, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you are enjoying this episode or the show in general, whether it's this episode or other weeks, whether you're watching live now or watching post live later, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like. It sincerely helps myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes. It puts the episode towards more of the front page of YouTube for the algorithm. So please and thank you. Drop a like on this video if you be so kind. Let's keep going through. So yeah, good defense. I went through the outline of how to attack them. Let's flip some things to the offensive side of the ball. So one thing that I thought was very interesting, I like what Dave says here. I'm not feeling fuzzy about that Washington D-line matchup. I'm going to continue to be skeptical of the Bills' offensive line until I see them consistently produce in the run and in pass protection against a quality defensive line. I thought the Jets got the better of them in week 1, but again, that's a really quality group up front, and Washington is in that vein and in that mold of a group that, especially from a pass rush perspective, can really get after the quarterback. I was disappointed again with how the game started for Washington's defense. From a run defense standpoint, them just getting blown off the ball, not maintaining gap integrity, just really getting, taken advantage of in a variety of ways up front. Again, they course corrected as the game went on, but this is a real quality group. So I would not feel fuzzy about them either. Again, I think it's a matchup overall. I think the Bills can win this game, and they're favored. So I think they're favored by like 6.5 or 7 points, which, Vegas, I think that's a good line for them. But this Washington defensive line is a very tremendous group. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball for the Commanders, very interesting piece. So Sam Howell, Washington quarterback, dude who can really sling it. Beautiful spiral when he uncorks it. He's been sacked 10 times so far this year, which is the second most in the entire NFL. And amongst 33 qualifying quarterbacks, he has the highest percentage of pressures converted to sacks at 35.7%, which is extremely high. So roughly 3.5 out of every 10 pressures, he's going down, he's getting sacked. He's also responsible for 16% of those sacks himself, which is the 12th highest amongst quarterbacks. So if you can generate pressure on Sam Howell, you can get to him, which is weird because he is a bit of an athletic guy. But from what I've seen, when he is getting sacked, it's from a processing standpoint. He's waiting for someone to come open. He's waiting for this route concept to develop, and it's not there. Receivers have either been jammed at the line or defenses have distributed the routes correctly, and there's no one open, and he's kind of sitting there waiting and trying to make a play, and it just does not happen. He's a quarterback who, again, when he spins it, it is really, really, really pretty. But there have been those times where he brings those sacks upon himself. Again, 16% of those sacks are on him, which is the 12th highest in the league. But the bigger piece is, again, the highest percentage of pressures converted to sacks at 35.7%. For reference, Josh Allen was one of the best in the league last year. He had the 6th lowest pressures converted to sack percentage at about 15% last year. So that's a huge, again, it's early, which affects the sample size, but that is a huge piece. Also, Sam Howell's average time to throw is 2.88 seconds. Not the longest in the world, but decently long. Anything that starts to approach 3 is kind of getting more to that longer side. So there's that as well. Staying with the conversation on Howell, he's 17th out of 32 qualifying quarterbacks in EPA per play. For reference, Josh Allen is 9th. He's 16th in completion percentage over expected. Josh Allen is first, which is a fun piece that I did not know before doing research for this episode. The Washington Commanders offense, you're going to see a lot of middling pieces from an advanced metric perspective. The Commanders offense, they're 16th in EPA per play, 16th in the pass, 14th in the run game. Their offensive line is tied for 17th in pass blocking efficiency. The Bills' offensive line is 14th. The Commander offense is 10th in rushing DVOA, 17th in passing offense DVOA, and 11th overall in offensive DVOA. Here's a very interesting piece for Sam Howell on the year for Mr. Sam Howell. He has only 2 passes that have been attempted 20 yards or more. He's 2 for 2 on those throws for 65 yards, including a 32-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin, which we're going to take a peek at in a minute, that 30-something yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin in week 2. So only 2 passes on the year have been attempted 20 yards or more. 27.1% of his throws have come in the intermediate, that 10 to 19 yard range. 40% of his throws have come in that short area, 0 to 9, and then 15.7% have come behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of screens and pieces. So what you're going to get from Sam Howell, he can uncork it. He's got a real pretty ball when he throws it, and there is speed at their receiver position. Samuel can get vertical, McLaurin can get vertical, Dotson can get vertical, but what you've really seen thus far is a quarterback who is attacked a lot of pieces, again, in the short and intermediate. And we're going to take a look at his passing charts now. This is his week 1. Let's share the screen. Okay, here's his week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals. Not great. So again, you see right there, 19 to 31, 202 yards, 1 tutty, 1 interception, and a lot from the middle of the field over to the left, really hammering that left side, not a ton to the right. But again, you can see where he is living. 15 yards and below is the heavy majority for everything. And again, 19 to 31 in that game. Now, if we look at what he did in week 2, let's go to the week 2 graphic. Again, what's fun is how David mentioned earlier, you saw a different kind of attack from them against Denver. So you have more pass attempts in this game. For reference, again, he had 31 in that week 1 game against Arizona. Now in this game, let me pull off the banner at the bottom so you can see that. This game, he had 39, so 8 more pass attempts, but much more productive overall. And you see different type of attack, right? Not as much from the middle of the field to the left. Now you have more of attack on the right. You have more, I would say, not equal dispersion of the ball, but just a different kind of attack in this game. So going with David's point earlier of kind of morphing and going based off of what the defense is giving you. Eric Bieniemy calling a game plan early on that is based on kind of poking and prodding and trying to figure out what the defense is throwing at them, who they're going to be in that game, and then adjusting accordingly. Again, these, I wish I could put them side by side, but just really 2 different passing charts, not necessarily from an overall depth perspective, but from where they were working. Heavy into the left in week 1, heavier into the right here in week 2. But again, going with that idea of attacking where you want, where you think the defense is vulnerable, trying to mitigate their strengths, amplify their weaknesses. So a different type of passing attack and concerted effort in between these 2 weeks from Mr. Sam Howell. And again, I wanted to bring up this play. So the throw, we talked about it earlier with David, that throw to Terry McLaurin, that touchdown throw. Here it is. But I'll pull it up for you folks. Real pretty. Just going to let it play here. And you can see drops back, steps up. Gorgeous. Right over the safety in the middle of the field. McLaurin goes up, snags it. That's going to be a big piece that I think is also going to test this Bills secondary. Christian Benford has played well. We're going to take a look at some Benford pieces as we go forward in this game. But there's a lot of athleticism, a lot of juice at the wide receiver position for Washington, whether it's short and underneath in the screen game, whether it's pressing vertical, whether it's getting into that intermediate. Terry McLaurin, juice and athleticism and speed and precision as a route runner. Again, I think if Terry McLaurin had consistency at the quarterback play, he statistically would be a top 10, top 5 receiver in this NFL. I love what Jahan Dotson does. Again, athletic, precision, plays big at the catch point, can go up and get it. Curtis Samuel is electric. He's got some juice as a gadget guy, but added a little more refinement to his game as a receiver. This wide receiver group is going to test the Buffalo Bills secondary. Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Christian Benford has, some size to him, but the Bills secondary isn't this overall athletic, group of athletic and speed, merchant type savants. They're guys that are based on that win based on their processing, based on their technicality, based on their form and their precision. It can be tough for dudes like that when they're going up against a wide receiver grouping that is full of juice and full of athleticism. And against a quarterback, again, if you give Sam Howell this time, this is in the second half, they started to pinpoint things a bit differently here. He gets time. Look at real pretty shuffle. That's gorgeous. It's so aesthetically pleasing. Throws it on a rope, downfield, perfect ball placement, and then Terry McLaurin goes up and he gets it, makes the catch in traffic, holds on as he's contacted midair, holds on as he goes to the ground. That's a big boy play. That's an all-pro. David said it earlier. That's an all-pro type throw from Sam Howell. That's an all-pro type catch from Terry McLaurin. That's pretty. Now, this type of throw isn't necessarily the regularity for Sam Howell, but he's got this capability to uncork these if he gets that time and he gets that ability, or when he gets that time and he gets that comfortability in the pocket. This throw is gorgeous. And again, you got a dude like Terry McLaurin where the throw is gorgeous. Even if it wasn't, McLaurin has the ability to go up and make you right even when you're wrong with that throw. So the fact that this is a dime from Sam Howell really helps, but McLaurin has the ability to kind of erase any potential mistakes for his quarterback. Dude is so good. And again, that type of athletic, speedy type of receiving group with McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel, even De'Ami Brown, who's got some juice to his game, but then you add the technique on top of it. Like McLaurin is a technician who operates with precision. Dotson is in that mold as well, albeit to a lesser extent. They can pose some problems for the Bills on the outside, who are a secondary that are built on technique and technicality and not necessarily athleticism and speed. But yeah, one more time with this throw, absolutely gorgeous. Howell to Terry McLaurin. As we talk here on the show, so again, we talk about the schematic opponents. So what do? You got to get pressure on Sam Howell. I think you can go with that for most weeks, but him having, again, even though it is a small sample size with having 2 weeks thus far, him having that high percentage of pressures converted to sacks at 35.7%, that is extremely, extremely telling. It means his pocket navigation isn't necessarily the best. Maybe he's holding on to his reads a little too long. Maybe if you jam the receivers or muddy his reads, he will hold on to that football. It will add some beats to his throw. Again, his average time to throw is 2.88 seconds, so he will hold on to that ball from time to time. And the fact that he only has 2 attempts on the year for 20 yards or more means he's just holding on to the ball, trying to let things develop in the short and intermediate and the underneath areas. And if that's happening, that'll give you the opportunity to kind of generate some sacks and generate some pressures. So that starts with the biggest piece against this Washington offense. Getting pressure on Sam Howell and then converting those pressures into sacks. Get them behind the sticks. Make them have to get off script. They want to run the ball. They want to attack the underneath and the intermediate. It's hard to attack the underneath and the intermediate because that usually requires you to stay on schedule. But you can't stay on schedule if it's 2nd and 16 or 2nd and 19. You want to feed the ball to Brian Robinson, who is this pounding, physical, downhill type of runner. His game doesn't necessarily lend itself to 2nd and long situations or 3rd and long situations. You can kind of take them out of their comfort zone, take Sam Howell out of his comfort zone. Now, if you get into those 2nd and longer situations or those 3rd and longer situations, Antonio Gibson out of the backfield can gouge you on screens. And that's been an area that I think has been a cause for concern for the Bills these first 2 weeks. It showed up against the Jets. It showed up against the Raiders in week 2. Part of it is the nature of what this Bills defense is. They want to get upfield. They want to penetrate. They want to attack. And teams can use that against them at times. If you have your defensive front getting upfield, right, and all of a sudden they've gotten upfield and you catch them in an aha or a gotcha moment and you dump it over their head, there's going to be space behind it. And then because they are a nickel defense, because they have numbers dropping into coverage, usually if you get that ball behind that first level, sometimes it's only one linebacker who's in the vicinity trying to make a play against three linemen. Sometimes it's Terrell Bernard, sometimes it's Matt Milano, and it can be tough. The Bills have been gouged in that screen game. I think that's an area that they have to watch out for against the Commanders because they have had success with their screens. David Harrison talked about it earlier when breaking down one of the pieces that Washington has been successful with thus far, especially in week 2 against Denver. And they've got good screen capable receivers. McLaurin, Dotson, Curtis Samuel. But again, from the backfield, even Brian Robinson isn't bad on the screen piece as well. He gets upfield in a hurry, but Antonio Gibson has that wide receiver background because he was a receiver before he converted to a running back. They've got juice out of the backfield. You got to be careful with that screen game. That's a big piece that worries me with Washington's offense. If the Bills get them in second and long, and you're thinking, sweet, we got them in second and 16, second and 17, all of a sudden they can make it 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3 because they can rattle off a 13 or 14-yard screen pass to a receiver or a running back. Or, again, first down, they've got guys who can take a screen and turn it into 15, 20, 25-yard gains in the blink of an eye because of their speed and athleticism. This is a group, David and I were talking about it offline, and I've said it, I believe, on this show or other shows. The quarterback play has really, really been the only thing that's held back this Washington offense for years. They have one of the best skill position groupings in the entire NFL when you're talking about receivers, running backs, the tight end room. Like Logan Thomas isn't a stud, but he's no slouch. They've got real quality at the skill positions. The only thing they've been kind of waiting on has either been an offensive coordinator to unlock or unleash things, but more so just consistency at the quarterback play. When they had Alex Smith, he wasn't pushing the ball downfield. Then you got Ryan Fitzpatrick. He went down and you were done there. Taylor Heineke was fun, but he was limited in terms of his skill set and what he could do. Now you've got Sam Howell, who's got some athleticism, who's got the arm, and you pair that with Eric Bieniemy, who is a skilled offensive mind. You now all of a sudden you've got some pieces in play or in place with the offensive coordinator and the quarterback who can potentially take advantage of a legitimate plethora of weapons at the wide receiver and running back position. Like, I like Brian Robinson as a running back. The fact that he's the one and Antonio Gibson is the two, they're two different kinds of backs. That's a really fun group. And then again, McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, even De'Ami Brown, they've got a real quality stable of weapons on this team. And for a Bills defense that, I know some people asked questions about it earlier. Jordan Poyer's looked slow at times this year. I don't think Micah Hyde has as much, but Hyde, Poyer, and Tre'Davious White have never been the most athletic guys. They are not guys that win because they're super fast or super rangy. Micah Hyde has tremendous range because he does have good enough long speed, but his range is usually due to his processing. He's extremely efficient with his angles and his processing. He knows how to read quarterbacks. He knows how to read route distributions and the angle that he takes to the ball. It's like being a really good center fielder. You don't have to be the fastest to be a great center fielder. It's all about your angle to the ball. He's extremely efficient. There are no wasted steps, no wasted motions. But you take Hyde, you take Poyer, you take Trey, even Benford, who I think has held his own. This isn't an overly athletic secondary or an overly speedy group. Trying to think the camera went blurry on me there for a minute. There we go. This is an overly speedy or athletic group. And if you're comparing it to the Washington, skill positions, McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, they got the Bills secondary when it comes to speed. So the Bills are going to have to win with technique. They're going to have to win with their processing and their communication and their efficiency. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do if you're outmatched athletically or physically. So got to limit the screen game, got to get to Sam Howell and sack him, keep him off schedule. Again, you can say that on most weeks against most opponents, but like I keep, drilling home, that 35.7 pressures converted to sack percentage is ridiculously high for Sam Howell. So he's shown early on that if you get pressure on him, you can sack him. That's because he's keeping his eyes downfield. He's trying to make a play. He's not necessarily feeling what is happening around him. And for an edge grouping that has stood out this year from a positive standpoint, highlighted by by Greg Rousseau and Leonard Floyd, you can get him around that. You can get around those tackles, get around the arc, trace back, and get flat, pressure him. Or Ed Oliver has been tremendously successful thus far, generating pressure up the gut, get upfield, and bring him down. This is a quarterback that has not eluded or evaded pressure. This is not a quarterback who has tremendous pocket navigation or manipulation. Take advantage of that, bring him down. Yeah, those are some pieces there. Ooh. Another super chat, I believe, here from Jessica. Oh, man, this question. Jessica, thank you very much again for being here and for your super chat. Jessica says, who's been the better corner so far, White or Benford? I'm going to say Trey White. I've liked a couple really, really good reps from Christian Benford. I don't think Benford's been bad, but you also got to take the assignment into account, right? You know, Trey drawing Garrett Wilson and drawing Devontae Adams. Those are much different matchups than Benford drawing Alan Lazard, and I don't even know who the wide receiver 2 was on Sunday for the Raiders. Well, Trey Tucker on certain reps, but Jacoby Myers being down really hindered and limited what the Raiders were. I don't think Trey has been as bad as he might potentially be getting a rep for this year. I know, you know, he had the missed tackle. He had some pieces that were regrettable, again, from a tackling standpoint against the Raiders, against the Jets. But he was in great position on Garrett Wilson on that touchdown. Wilson just got the better of him and made a ridiculous play, and then Adams got the better of him on several reps for the Raiders. But I don't think we've seen Benford really get tested against a quality wide receiver 2. This week will be more interesting because whether the Bills aren't going to necessarily travel, maybe they will a little in this game. I know White traveled with Wilson a bit, but you're not going to get a rep off. There is no significant drop off from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2 like you have had in the first 2 weeks. You know, if Trey is on Terry McLaurin, you're going to have your hands full with Jahan Dotson. If Trey is on Jahan Dotson, Benford's going to have his hands full with Terry McLaurin, even with Curtis Samuel and all these pieces. So I think Benford will have more of a significant test this week. But I would say Trey has been better thus far, even though I haven't loved everything. But no, see, all right, so I'm going to grab this comment from Dobbs. Dobbs says, put Benford to the safety position and get Elam on the field in one-on-one man situations. The fastest first-round healthy DB being a scratch is a travesty. The issue is he gets panicky at the catch point and at the top of routes. He's still grabby. He's still committing penalties before the ball is in the air, while the ball is in the air. It's not just enough to be big and fast and athletic. He's not ready. Even if you think he should be in there in one-on-one man situations. I watched him in one-on-one man situations in camp get eaten up by a variety of receivers. I would love if Kaiir Elam was CB2. The Bills want him to be CB2. Him not being on the field, if you think it's a travesty, that's completely fine. But it's more of a travesty that's put on the Kaiir Elam than it is onto the coaching staff or because they're making some mistake. You don't want to put Benford to safety. The reason Benford's starting at CB2 is because he's played better CB than Kaiir Elam. And here's a comment, too, from Walter that says he looked ready in the playoffs. Because you're thinking about the interception and you're thinking about the PBU on Gesicki that kind of ended the game, or that did end the game. Both were very phenomenal plays, right? There were also 2 other reps. I broke it down on Twitter. He completely blows coverage on a couple reps, and he has Jordan Poyer hollering at him in his ear because he blew these coverages in big situations. But Skylar Thompson, third-string quarterback for Miami, doesn't have the chops to read it, react, and make the Bills pay for it. The biggest thing with Elam is he makes those mental mistakes, whether it's in his technique, whether it's trusting his eyes, or knowing what his responsibility and his assignment is overall. Again, I think he's gotten better in knowing his assignment as last year went on and then going into this year. But Christian Benford has been the better play at CB2. The Bills want Kaiir Elam to be the guy. And I also think, again, to put this into I don't know what this is. Elam shut Tyreek Hill down in the playoff game. Man, so Dobbs says, not committing penalties on the bench or a healthy scratch. How will they ever find out? They're finding out in practice because he's making mistakes in practice. He's grabbing in practice. He's grabbing in the preseason. He's getting beat in preseason. Like when he gets the opportunities, and practice is a huge piece. The coaches are seeing him every day. They know who the best guy for the job is. And if it's Kaiir, cool. If it's Dane Jackson, cool. If it's Christian Benford, cool. They have no bias. You think the Bills don't want to start their first-round corner that they traded up for? They want to start Kaiir Elam. He hasn't played better than Christian Benford. He hasn't played better than Dane Jackson. I want him to. He hasn't been that guy. He's not making plays on the ball. He's committing penalties. He's getting beat. He's not the guy right now. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be the guy next year or later on in this season. He just hasn't been the guy. He's made a handful of good plays. He's also made a handful of mental mistakes, right? And the mental mistakes just aren't being broadcasted as much. But Bean and McDermott talked about it this offseason before camp. even started. And again, the point here, how will they ever find out? They're finding out in practice every day. They're watching him go one-on-one. They're watching him cover Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir and Trent Sherfield and whoever else. The same way if you went to an open practice in St. John Fisher, you got to see Kaiir Elam go up against these guys and test his mettle and see what happened. And the reports were, not just from myself being there, but from the beat reporters and everybody who was there, he was grabby again this preseason, much like he was, or in camp this year, much like he was last year when they had to put boxing gloves on him to make him stop grabbing, because that's how grabby he was. That's a significant piece. But fair enough. Sophia, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for the super chat. Sophia says, what is better about Josh under center? Thanks. I think it's not necessarily about what he does better under center as it is tied to, I think, the specifically for me, it's the under center play action game that I think is better, right? And I just think his sleight of hand is absolutely tremendous. So when he drops back, or he snaps in, he goes for play action, he's so adept at sucking in the second level or even sometimes third level defenders that they come so forward thinking it's a run because they're buying that run action, and they're very vulnerable behind, whether it's up the seam or crossers or things in the intermediate. So one, I think it starts with his hand motion, and he's a magician when it comes to sleight of hand on the play action game. So the under center play action game, I just think is tremendous. And then the under center play action game, not just from a Josh standpoint, that's usually your higher percentage play action opportunity to really suck in those second level defenders, and it just widens passing windows. It widens passing lanes for a quarterback and makes things a bit easier. Now the flip side is that under center piece, usually you're turning your back to the defense. So if the pre to post snap picture changes and you don't read it correctly, you can be prone to mistakes. But Josh, fingers crossed, no jinx, hasn't been susceptible to that at this point. And then I also think too, from an under center standpoint, when you're taking regular snaps, straight drop back snaps from under center, there is some semblance of more of a rhythm to it. Shotgun, you snap it, you might just take 1-2 steps, depending on if it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step drop, whatever it is, under center or shotgun. There's a different rhythm and nature. And I think Josh is a quarterback who responds well to the rhythm of things, whether it's the play action or straight dropbacks under center. Like most quarterbacks respond well to rhythm, but Josh does a really good job of being in rhythm and then keeping everything tight and compact, whether it's his footwork, his mechanics, things really work well. And I think that pairs well with being able to calm him mentally and then things working together. Where are some comments here? I want to go. What double standard is there? I'm just sorry. I don't want to. Oh, Dobbs, you're saying Poyer's getting beat 2 games in a row, but he gets it past them. Josh made 4 huge mistakes that cost a division game. The point though is, so Poyer getting beat. Okay. So if Poyer, Elam, and Allen are all the same because they all made mistakes, there isn't a Christian Benford at safety or at quarterback. So one, with Josh Allen, you're not pulling Josh Allen. Like, you're not going to bench Josh Allen, so that's kind of irrelevant. But Poyer making mistakes, Poyer's an all-pro safety. Like, so if he's making mistakes and you want to bench him, that's fine. What does your second level or second string safety look like? The Bills don't have a Christian Benford quality player as their number 2 safety. Poyer, even if he's making mistakes, is still by far the best option for the Bills at safety along with Micah Hyde. That's not the case at corner. That is not the case at corner. I don't think that's a double standard. Kaiir Elam, I want him to play. He didn't make the plays he needed to when he's had the opportunities. He's flashed a bit, but I think those flashes have obviously been outweighed by the mistakes that he makes, that they're seeing, that the coaching staff is regularly seeing in practice. Here's also another way to put it, and then I'm going to move on to the next topic. This whole piece with Kaiir Elam not starting, and I don't know why this isn't taken into account more, Sean McDermott's track record for developing defensive backs going back to his time in Philadelphia, let alone, also going in Carolina. But just think about his time with the Bills. Micah Hyde was a jack of all trades defensive back, mainly a slot corner and punt returner. Jordan Poyer was a cast-off afterthought free agent signing from Cleveland. McDermott turned both of them into all-pro safeties. Taron Johnson was a 4th-round nickel corner. He's turned him into one of the best nickel corners in all of football. Trey White was a late first-round pick First round pick, yes, not somebody that everybody tabbed and said, man, this guy's going to be an all pro corner. He took Dane Jackson as a late round day 3 pick and turned him into a low end CB2, high end CB3. He took Levi Wallace and turned him in from a UDFA to a low end CB2, high end CB3. He took Christian Benford, who was a 6th round pick, and turned him into, as of right now, a low end CB2. We'll see what he is because he's still only in his 2nd year and still barely has a handful of snaps under his belt as a starter. Sean McDermott has proven his worth in terms of getting every drop of blood from a defensive back stone in his tenure with the Buffalo Bills. And that's with guys that don't have a lot of blood to give. Levi Wallace doesn't have the athleticism or the size or the speed or anything that Kaiir Elam does. And Sean McDermott was able to increase and raise Levi Wallace's floor and ceiling the way that he did with Trey and Hyde and Poyer and Taryn and Christian Benford, it seems. And Kaiir, on the flip side, has all this blood in the stone. He's got the measurables. He's got the speed, the length, the strength, all these pieces. But he can't seem to get on the field. So this coach and this coaching staff that has this track record of getting every drop of blood from the defensive back stone and raising DB's floors and ceilings, it's their fault that Kaiir Elam isn't playing. It's a travesty that Kaiir Elam isn't playing. I don't know why the conversation isn't what is Kaiir Elam doing wrong that he's not getting on the field. Why is it a travesty? Why is it Sean McDermott's fault? Why is it the coaching staff's fault? Why are they making a mistake? Their track record gives them a lot of credibility when it comes to the defensive back grouping. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. But if I have to lean one way or the other and say, Kaiir Elam's not playing, whose fault do I think it is? Sean McDermott and the coaching staff or Kaiir Elam? I'm going to lean Kaiir Elam because the track record of Sean McDermott and this coaching staff when it comes to developing DBs and getting them to execute is pretty strong. And again, player development is not a fine science. There are so many things and so many variables that go into a player increasing their floor or hitting their ceiling or raising their ceiling. It goes to the scouting department. It goes to the system. It goes to the coaches. It goes to the training staff and the culture and the building environment. Then the player themselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, all these things. It's a very inaccurate science. It's the reason, player evaluation isn't exact. It's a reason that guys, bust in the draft. It's a reason why nobody has 100% hit rate or success rate. But, and I appreciate you, Dob, saying I'm not mad at you. I total respect. Everyone makes mistakes. They're saying, no, absolutely. And I said it, everybody makes mistakes, but it's just weird. The Kaiir Elam narrative it doesn't seem like people think enough of, well, maybe Kaiir is making the mistake. I don't know. It's, Sean McDermott is making a mistake. The coaching staff is making a mistake. Also, too, if you just watch the preseason, you can't have watched the preseason this year and thought Kaiir Elam was the better corner than Dane Jackson or Christian Benford because he was not. I want him to be. I want scheme versatility in my corners. I want to be able to go man or zone in any way, shape, or form at any point in time. Kaiir Elam is a step in that direction. He was the 3rd best corner out of Benford, himself, and Dane Jackson. And that's unfortunate for him because I really like him as a player, and I still think he's got a good head on his shoulders. Now, we'll see what happens as the year goes on and year 3 potentially for him. But, see, and this is a great comment here from Pops. Pops says, I blame Benford and Jackson for the reason Elam isn't playing. And I think that's spot on. Benford and Jackson have both played really well, despite being more limited as athletes or having less blood in the stone from a defensive back standpoint. And yeah, good comment there from Pops saying, yes, Pops, Elam would, or good comment here from Pete. Pete saying, yes, Pops, Elam would definitely be out there if Benford Jackson hadn't beat him out by a good margin. That's a fair point. No apologies, Jessica. I like the conversation starting. I like it. We have a good, healthy dialogue and discussion. I'm not angry. I'm not flustered or frustrated. I appreciate Dobbs sticking to his guns and believing what he believes. I appreciate you starting the conversation. I like that on this show, especially as I ride solo on the episodes once the guest leaves. I love good conversation, engagement, and back and forth, whether it's you all in the chat or with me. So don't apologize. I think it was an awesome conversation starter. And it's obviously a hot button topic, right? Like, people want Kaiir Elam to start. I want Kaiir Elam to start. I want the scheme versatility. I don't want to have wasted a 1st-round draft pick on a corner that's not going to play. I don't want that. The Bills don't want that. It's a hot button topic. And again, I think also they can't go hand in hand, or they should go hand in hand. Elam not starting sucks. Benford starting is a huge, huge feather in the cap. If you hit on a 6th-round corner and he's capable of being your CB2, that's awesome. Now, that doesn't mean you didn't waste resources drafting Elam in the first, but they kind of go, better hand or kind of go hand in hand pieces. I'm going to go one more. Walter says Cook wasn't a better player in practice, but was a more productive player on the field when given the opportunity. I understand the value of practice, but we don't draft Cook or Elam to stay with the status. Oh, stay with the status quo. Yeah, but I think Elam's just making mistakes. I mean, look at Cook's carries. He fumbled early on in that Rams game. His usage rate weeks 1 through 9 or 1 through 11 was nowhere close to what it was down the stretch. He had to re-earn the confidence of this coaching staff in game, but it starts with earning that in practice. And then Cook eventually earned it and went forward, and he added a lot to this Bills offense down the stretch. I just think just putting out from a play perspective, I just look at the preseason this year. Forget everything that happened last year. Just go into this 2023 preseason training camp, all of it. Who's played better out of Kaiir, Elam, Christian Benford, Dane Jackson? That's it. Kaiir Elam has played third best out of Benford, Jackson, and himself, and that's why he's not playing, which is unfortunate for him and potentially for the Bills. Now, let's switch topics. Let's go to stock up, stock down after week 2. Excited to break this down. Some pieces I'm saving for tomorrow night in the film room with Eric Turner. We got a lot to dive into and break down with how the Bills, won and what they were successful with in week 2. But this stock up, stock down piece, I wanted to grab a couple of specific pieces that I was excited about, that I liked from week 2. And we're going to dive right into it here. Again, for those of you playing at home, watching here live, who or what is trending up or trending down for you? It could be a player, it could be a coach, it could be a side of the ball, it could be a position group, whatever is on your mind. Stock up, stock down. Let me know in the comments. I'll bring up everything I can. I like this comment here from Save a Whale, Rider running back. Stock down, Bills PR putting Takeo Spikes behind a wall for the game. Yeah, that was really disappointing. He tweeted it out, and then some other pieces came out that Bills legends haven't had the best experience, which is really disappointing to hear. Fair point there. Jessica, awesome comment. Jessica says, Jessica's super chats, huge stock up. I like it. I like it a lot. We're going to start with... Let me go to huddle. There we go. So the first piece I wanted to bring up is Sean McDermott. Couple plays this game, changing the pre to post snap picture on an offense, in this case, Jimmy G and the Raiders. This is something Leslie Frazier did at times. I'm going to drop the banner on the bottom so we can fully see everything. I love this comment here from Chris. Chris says, Dalton Kincaid to the freaking moon. Absolutely. We're going to talk about him shortly. But I wanted to start here with the tape here on Sean McDermott changing the pre to post snap picture on offenses and on the Raiders. This is the thing that I really wanted to see from the Bills defense more coming into this year, whether, and it can be in a variety of things, showing one coverage and dropping to another, showing guys at the line of scrimmage and you're not really blitzing. It could be a simulated pressure. It could be a creeper. It could be showing a 7-man pressure and actually only rushing your traditional 4 or only rushing 3, or showing a 2-high safety look pre-snap and spinning down to single high post-snap, or vice versa. Anything to change the pre to post-snap picture is what I wanted to see more from this Bills defense. And we saw it for a couple reps in this game. I'm going to show 2 of them. One worked, one didn't, but I like the thought process behind it. So let us dive into the play here. So first play, 3rd and 5 for the Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, I was doing so good. I didn't say Oakland the whole time. It's so tough for me. I still call the Commanders by their old name. I still call the Vegas Raiders Oakland. I call the Chargers San Diego. Oh, frustrating. Okay, so Vegas comes in motion. And if you're looking at the alignment from the Buffalo Bills, so got Micah Hyde here. We've got Trey White here. You've got Christian Benford here. Taron Johnson, Pete up here on the running back. And then if you're looking at the tight end from a Raiders perspective, maybe Floyd's going to drop on him. Maybe Milano's going to drop out because he's not really showing pressure. What you have here is a pressure look from the Buffalo Bills and what looks like paired with man coverage. Now I'm going to go slow on the snap. Watch what happens. So again, let's go back. Watch Taron Johnson right here Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano. Sorry, I've circled over all of them. Boom. Actually, no, forget that because you can still see it. So, Karen Johnson, boom. Terrell Bernard, boom. Matt Milano, boom. Bernard and Milano are mugged up in your A gaps. You've got Taron Johnson to the inside of AJ Epinesa at the top there. On the snap, so again, right now you're showing Floyd, Ed, Milano, Taron. I don't know who's next to Taron or Bernard, Taron, and then AJ Epinesa. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're showing a 7-man pressure, and then you've got 4 on the back end. It looks like man coverage, looks like single high on the back end. Okay, maybe it's a cover 1 blitz, some kind of man coverage on the back end. You got a 7-man pressure, maybe 5 are coming, maybe 6, maybe it's all 7. Let's see what happens. Drop out? Nope. Just a regular 4-man pressure. And the Bills are playing cover 3 underneath it. Nice, right? And then as the play goes forward, Jimmy G spins out. AJ Epinesa gets the deflection, right? Now, let's go to the end zone angle. Because here's the important piece. Because the Bills are showing 1, 2, Jordan Phillips was incorrect in analyzing people. So Milano is 1. Oh, forget names. I'm falling apart here because we've been going so long. So you got 1, you got 2, you got 3, you got 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-man pressure, right? You've only got 5 offensive linemen. So what do the Raiders do? They keep in a tight end. They keep in a running back. Why? Because they think it's going to be a 7-man pressure. But on the snap, like we talked about, the Bills drop out. So the Bills are only rushing 4. The Raiders have kept in 7 to protect the 5 offensive linemen plus the tight end plus the running back who's over here. So you've got 7 protecting. Jimmy Garoppolo makes 8. 8 players in the backfield versus only 3 in the route distribution. Receiver here and 2 receivers here. That is 3 receivers out in the route distribution versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For those of you playing at home, if I already said the Bills rush 4, 11 minus 4 is 7. Bills have the heavy coverage number advantage here. And it happens because the Raiders kept 2 potential route distribution candidates in their running back and their tight end. They kept them in the backfield to protect. So not only have you confused Jimmy G on this play, because look at, he turns, he wants to fire it right here, but Milano IDs him and jumps underneath here. And then Hyde's got eyes, White has eyes. Jimmy G doesn't feel comfortable throwing that ball. So he holds onto it. Ed does a great job, gets pressure. Jimmy G has to spin out. He's not the most mobile guy. Bills get into a good situation. So not only did you confuse the quarterback and change the pre to post snap picture, and you made him hold on to the ball, to the point that it helped your front 4 get home. Not only did you do all of that, but you also tricked the Raiders into keeping more men into the backfield to protect than they needed to. They didn't need to keep 7 in here. They could have just done it with 5 or even 6 if they wanted to use their running back or their tight end to chip or help out. But they did not need to keep in all 7. So you dropped 7 into coverage, but your look up front forced them to keep in the running back and the tight end, which means only 3 guys got into the route distribution. You have 7 in coverage versus 3 in the route distribution. That is a huge advantage for the defense, especially on 3rd and 5. And I also like the call too. They drop into cover 3 and you see Micah Hyde jams underneath. He's right here on Mr. Devontae Adams. Watch him get a piece, try and reroute a little bit. Then he drops back, plays underneath. You got Milano playing the sticks. He understands. You've got Taron over here playing the sticks. 3rd and 5. It's a smart call in a good situation. So just that little piece. So first stock up is Sean McDermott changing the pre to post snap picture and it working big time in a high leverage situation on a 3rd down. Jimmy G gets confused. Bills get pressure with 4. You get a batted ball. 4th down. Raiders have to punt. So again, you confused the quarterback because you changed the pre to post snap picture. You made him think one thing and it ended up being another. And you caused the Raiders to waste, quote unquote, 2 potential players that could have gone out into the route distribution. You made the Raiders waste them by keeping them in the backfield when they did not need to be in the backfield because they did not need to protect because you weren't actually going to bring 7. Now, another play with that. This play is in a similar mold, but it doesn't work this time. We're going to go through and next play here. Okay, here we go. Got it queued up. So again, similar, not the exact same, but a similar idea here. but they start to drop out late. So you've got Terrell Bernard here. You've got Matt Milano here. You've got that similar kind of mugged up A-gap look from the linebacker. Jordan Poyer has walked down here. Maybe he's blitzing. But at the end of the day, similar idea with what does it look like? So we've got a crowded line of scrimmage in a pressure look, similar to what we had on the last play. And then for those of you playing at home, what does it look like from a coverage perspective? Man coverage, man coverage, man coverage. That's what it looks like. And then you've got Micah Hyde on the back end who is playing that single high type of safety and that type of piece right there, right? So that's what it looks like for the Raiders. You're sitting there, okay, pressure look, man coverage on the back end. Let's see what happens. As the play goes on, as we get closer to the snap, you'll watch Taron Johnson. He starts to slowly drop out. I'm going to go into slow motion. Trey White starts to drop out. Terrell Bernard starts to drop out into the middle. Again, this is all happening as we're getting closer to the snap. And they drop out. Matt Milano drops out from the line. And again, you have a 4-man rush. And what you end up having is a 2 invert or a Tampa 2 robber type coverage. Called that for what we're going to see here. Okay, I'm going to stop it here. So you got Taron Johnson as a deep half player. You've got Trey White as a deep half player. This is also kind of what I liked with it. So not only are you changing the pre to post snap picture, but you're also flipping who is responsible for what. Usually in these coverages, you know, you folks know it. We show a lot of tape here on the show. We show a lot of tape in the film room. You follow me on Twitter, you see it. If you just watch the Bills, you see it. These are normally occupied by safeties. So this is normally Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer. This is normally Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer. But on this play, you've got Jordan Poyer down here acting almost as a cloud corner. So normally, he and Trey White have flipped. Usually Poyer is here or Hyde is here. They flipped. Who's the deep half player? It's usually a safety. Nope, this time it's a corner. Same thing on the other side. Taron Johnson is usually your man at the slot. He's usually your nickel guy. He's your deep half player up top. So that's fun in and of itself. And then you pair that with, so you've got the kind of inverted piece there. And then you've got Micah Hyde. I'm going to go back a little bit. Micah Hyde right here on the snap. Watch him start to walk down and creep down. This is what I call like that Tampa 2 robber piece. So he's dropping down like a robber would in like a cover 1 robber type of look. But in that Tampa 2, Bills have run it before. Tremaine Edmonds is usually that guy streaking down the middle of the field. Or if you watch the Buccaneers or the Lovie Smith Bears, you'd see Derek Brooks running up the middle of the field for the Bucs. You would see Brian Urlacher running up the middle of the field. Like it's a 2 deep coverage, that Tampa 2, but that linebacker will occupy that middle third. But Hyde is occupying that middle third. But he's doing it from a single high post snap alignment. Again, everything here shows man coverage and a single high safety. And just watch how the picture changes. Players start to drop, change. What coverage is coming, we don't know. You get that 2 invert, kind of Tampa 2 robber type look, and Hyde is there. Now, this ends up being a completion for a first down to Davante Adams in the hole. So it doesn't work, but I like the idea of it. I like the experimentation. I like the change in piece. And honestly, this is a kudos to Jimmy G why this doesn't work. So from this angle, we'll watch things go. Watch Jimmy G hold Micah Hyde and Terrell Bernard with his eyes. So you see Jimmy G, he's looking right here. And watch what it does to Hyde. Watch what it does to Bernard. We go forward. They both, Hyde holds just a little bit. Bernard cuts in because Jimmy G eyes Renfro. Now watch Jimmy G switch his eyes. Turns his shoulders. He goes to Davante. So that's a good job by Jimmy G. I like the coverage. I like to change change. Again, you're just at the basic level, you're changing the pre to post snap picture. Also, again, from another perspective, the Raiders on this one kept 7 in to protect again. Michael Mayer, the tight end, the running back is over here. You can't see him. He's small. He's behind the offensive lineman. So they only sent 3 into the route distribution, which again, heavy numbers advantage for the Bills in coverage. Should have been a win. It wasn't. Guys on the other side of the ball get paid too. They're also professionals. This is a good job from Davante Adams, finding the soft spots, sitting down. And then Jimmy G manipulating Bernard. Watch when Hyde comes up. Watch how he just sits there, kind of hesitates before he goes out. There it is, right there. He starts to move right here towards Adams, but then he stops because of Jimmy G's eyes and he plants his feet. And that's just enough to let Jimmy G fit that ball in there. So that's a good job from Jimmy G. Again, those guys get paid to play the game too. But a big change in the pre to post snap picture. I'm going to let the play run through again. Not only do you change the pre to post snap picture, you make the Raiders waste 2 guys in pass protection again. Then you have the uniqueness on the back end with this 2 invert / Tampa 2 robber type of coverage. So you're changing who normally does what. You're changing the pre to post snap picture, all these things. It's unfortunate that they got beat on it by a good read from Jimmy G and some good eye manipulation. Again, right here. Holds high just enough. You see it? Holds, hesitates just enough. Bernard bites inside, which again isn't bad. You're reading the QB's eyes. Jimmy G makes a play. This is a guy who's been successful. He's comfortable with this type of look. Good play from Jimmy G. But a big stock up for me was Sean McDermott changing the pre to post snap picture. Again, we're only in week 2. I hope this starts to continue as we go forward. And these are just the early sprinklings or the planting of seeds for more type of pre to post snap picture chaos, and then potentially tying in with some different blitzes, with some different fronts. A lot of potential fun offshoots and avenues that you can have when you establish this kind of baseline if you are the Buffalo Bills. Another piece I wanted to bring up, that Christian Benford play, the one that was initially ruled pass interference and then ended up not. So here's Christian Benford up here, one-on-one with Trey Tucker, rookie from Cincinnati who can really fly. Saw him on tape when watching for Tyler Scott last year preparing for the draft. Well, this offseason preparing for the draft. But initially, Benford gets beat. I think a lot of you know this play, saw this play. Gets a little beat, but has a nice recovery. And you can see it a little on this angle, but we're going to go to the end zone angle to really confirm it. So again, they throw the flag initially, but ends up being reversed. I want to slow it down and go here. So watch Benford. He recovers, but as he gets and as he recovers and gets on Tucker, he doesn't actually impede Tucker. I think that's why they picked up the flag. So he runs him down. He sees Tucker start to eye the ball. As he gets close, he gets his hands on Tucker, but he does not impede him. And while he doesn't impede him, he also gets his head turned around, gets his hand up. This is a tremendous play by Tucker. It's actually, I feel bad for him, and it's a shame that it wasn't a catch. He goes up, gets it, makes the play on the ball. Even look at this. Like, this is good form. Benford's trying to get his hand and his arm in between the hands and the arm of Trey Tucker. He's trying to break this up. This is textbook. You try to punch through the ball, punch through the hands. Tucker goes up, makes an athletic, explosive play, and then shows good hands and brings the ball down. But then, okay, so you recover, you get your head turned around, you see the ball, you try to punch through the hands, it doesn't work. What do you do now? Push the guy out of bounds. Boom. And he pushes him down with some force too, which is nice to see. This is another angle too. So we have the other end zone angle. This will kind of put it in perspective as well. Again, he could have panicked here. He could have ran right through Trey Tucker and run him over. He could have grabbed him. He could have done a multitude of things that would have drawn the flag, that would have stayed a flag. And you can see it right here. Here he is on the bottom left of your screen. Starts to reach, just gets his hands on him, just to know where he is, to get a feel for him so he can turn and locate the football. He's not grabbing. He's not pulling. He's not pushing. Gets his head turned around. Tucker goes up, high points the football. Benford tries to go for the punch through, doesn't get it. Cool, slams him, puts him out of bounds. Good play from Christian Benford. Good recovery in a play where he could have potentially panicked. He could have freaked out. He could have made a mistake in a multitude of ways, in a multitude of fashions, but he doesn't. He stayed calm, cool, collected, made a play on the ball. Really liked it. Last play that I want to show from the stock up, stock down. I don't know why I closed my screen because there's one more that I wanted to show here, and pretty quick one. It's just amazing. We're gonna show Matt Milano mossing Brandon Jacobs. I'm just gonna go to the end zone angle. Here's Matt Milano. This play is just ridiculous. Like, there's not a ton of analysis that's needed. Like, I just think Matt Milano's stock is way up. Guy was an all-pro last year. Tremaine Edmonds leaves. He gets an interception in week 1 against the Jets that was really a gift thrown right at him. This one he earned. He's making plays in the run game. He's shooting gaps. He's fit in the run. He's banging against Jakob Johnson and acting as a force player in this game against heavy personnel looks for the Raiders. They're the Raiders' 255-pound fullback, Jakob Johnson. He's playing through his outside shoulder and forcing things in. He's showing physicality, burst, intelligence, processing, and then you get the athleticism. Drops out, waiting, sees the ball, sees the ball go to the running back, and here we go. Just jumps over him and rips it away from him. I'll play it in real time just so we can see it. Oh, you're going to dump it down? Okay, cool. Whoop. And that's ridiculous. Truly ridiculous. Let's watch it from this angle. Drops. Oh, it's a shame the field goal post kind of gets in the way there. You can see him start to anticipate it, and then Jimmy G puts it on there. Again, Bills get some pressure, and that's ridiculous. The ball skills, the athleticism, the hand-eye coordination, all of it. I'm just going to play it all from, play it through from the multitude of angles. That's just a hell of a play by Matt Milano. I don't think I've ever seen a linebacker moss a running back. I said it when it happened. I know there's the AJ Hawk play. I hadn't remembered that, but just like in the open field here, like that's just so hard to do. And Milano I'll skip ahead here, just makes it look absolutely effortless. Unreal. 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 And then the other end zone angle, just to wrap it up, put a nice, neat little bow on it for All-Pro Matty Mo or Matt Milano. Oh, that's a nice little ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Again, the ball skills, the athleticism, the precision, the hand-eye coordination. It's absolutely unreal to be able to pull that off in that situation. Other stock up in this game, the Bills' run game, and by extension, or stock up after this game. The Bills' run game, by extension, Ken Dorsey and Aaron Cromer. The Bills have 29 gap runs on the year as opposed to 11 zone runs, and many of those gap runs have been duo, with some runs having pullers sprinkled in, like Dart, for example. And the downhill nature of those duo runs, plus the track and the read for the running back, it pairs well with the makeup of the offensive line and James Cook's burst, speed, running style, even Latavius Murray and Damian Harris to a degree. You add in the 12 personnel and 13 personnel usage and the play action potential off those looks, and you just have yourself a well-catered run game mixed with a multiplicity that defenses have to account for. The Buffalo Bills are currently 4th in team rushing EPA per attempt. For running back carries only, they're 3rd. It's a small sample size as we're only 2 weeks in, but the James Cook, Latavius Murray, Damian Harris rotation paired with the gap scheme run focus with, again, that heavy emphasis on duo has yielded very positive returns early on. The addition of Osiris Torrance has given the offensive line more physicality and a people-moving presence. The addition of Connor McGovern, his free agent signing, has added plus athleticism versus last year at the left guard spot. And you pair all that, again, with a significant increase in 12 personnel usage and the potential to utilize more 7-man surfaces with it, and you have a legitimate downhill rushing attack that's capable of gashing defenses whenever they choose to, seemingly at will, especially if/when defenses choose to match that 12 personnel with nickel. Now, all of a sudden, like I mentioned earlier, you've got nickel corners, outside corners, safeties. They're in the box. They're in these run fits against offensive linemen or tight ends, and tight ends or offensive linemen are climbing to the second level or potential third level against these guys, and you're getting corners who are put in one-on-one situations against James Cook, who can beat them with speed around the corner if they're not precise with their angles, or they got to figure out how to tackle Damian Harris or Latavius Murray. It just puts the defense in disadvantageous matchups while putting the Bills offense in an advantageous matchup situation. Huge stock up for the Buffalo Bills run game. Just overall, conceptually, from a success rate, a multitude of ways. I like some of the blocks that Dalton Kincaid had in this game. He had a real great double team block on a duo run on the Latavius Murray touchdown run with Deion Dawkins. That piece was really nice. So seeing him continue to improve as a run blocker has been nice to see. This run game, just building on what they did in the preseason, we're starting to see more success, a rhythm and a routine, and something to hang their hat on. And it's a great pivot to have if the weather turns, or always pairing it with an explosive passing offense led by a tremendous quarterback in Josh Allen. So huge stock up for that Bills run game. Also some little stock up pieces. Dalton Kincaid, again, overall as well as a run blocker, but continuing to evolve as a pass catcher. I shouldn't say evolve, just continuing to find success. Finding the spaces in the zone, being able to settle down, read coverages, read the pre to post snap. Again, another game where he showed some physicality against defensive backs when he turned into a ball carrier after he made the catch, watching him run over nickels and safeties, using that size and athleticism together to be a mismatch when he has the ball in his hands. Real nice piece from him. I think Gabe Davis's stock is up. I tweeted it out earlier. I don't remember the exact piece. There's about like 150 qualifying receivers, running backs, and tight ends who have at least 5 targets on the year. Gabe Davis is 19th in EPA per target. So he had a nice improvement in this game. Several really good reps for him, pairing with Josh Allen, finding space, being able to break down and get open and create separation. Nice to see him not be hampered by that ankle injury that he had last year, early in the year, that carried throughout the majority of the year. So I think his stock up is up as well. But for me, the big one, Sean McDermott, being able to change the pre to post snap picture. Matt Milano, I think Benford's stock is up / kind of holding, but the big one is that run game. Myself and Eric Turner are going to dive into the Buffalo Bills run game, along with a lot of other schematic components from the offense and some from the defense, in tomorrow night's Cover One Film Room, live at 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, September 20th. So tune into that tomorrow night if you're watching live now, or if you're watching this later in the week, go back to the Cover One channel and find that. Some stock down pieces, a couple little things here and there. Jimmy Garoppolo had more players open than I think when he's going to watch the film, he's going to look back and realize he had some missed opportunities. He did have the middle open on several cover 3 reps against the Buffalo Bills. He missed some throws really early. He had Hunter Renfrow open in the middle against the Bills when they were in cover 3. He had Devontae Adams on a second down versus Trey. Bills were in man coverage. Raiders had a condensed split. I think if you'll remember the one, I don't have it queued up on the film, but Adams takes that release. He has a ton of space. Raiders are going from left to right. He has a ton of space, and Jimmy G just throws it a little too far behind him. He also had Devontae Adams when the Bills were in cover 4. He had Devontae Adams on a post. So there were some missed opportunities for the Raiders passing attack, and Jimmy G, he missed some spots in the middle. So I don't think the Bills coverage unit was completely locked down like it potentially could have been. There were some gaps. So that was one of the few stock downs coming from this game from a holistic structural standpoint that I really wanted to drill in on. But overall, a very strong performance for the Bills. Obviously, winning 38-10 against the Raiders and outscoring them 38-3 after going down 7-0. And now they roll into week 3 against the Washington Commanders, and we'll see what happens going into week 3. And as we switch here, want to show love to the sponsor. I show love at different points in the episode, depending on the week. One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, whether you're looking for delicious sweet sauce pie or different toppings or homemade blue cheese or just amazing food in a variety of forms and fashions, One Pie Pizza has you covered. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Homemade blue cheese, delicious sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. Again, they're good people making good food. They do a ton of initiatives throughout the year, giving back to the city of Buffalo and the community, whether it's partnering with Roswell and trying to knock out cancer, whether it's Toys for Tots or partnering with the SPCA, partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation, and fun. They just do a lot. They're good people making great food. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Do your taste buds some... I'm trying to think, do your taste buds a true service and do the community a service as well. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. And they're the best in Buffalo. I wouldn't have partnered with them if they weren't absolutely tremendous. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. And as we start to wind down here, that'll do it for us here on this episode of Disguised Coverage. We went a little long, but we had a lot to go through, a lot to break down. Actually have some more to break down, but I'm not going to go through it now. If you want more, if you have a question, thought, comments, concern I didn't get to in this episode, I apologize. Get at me on Twitter at @pro__ant. That's pro 2 _ANT. Give me a follow on Twitter or just at me, DM me, whatever. I'll get to your question. They're very active on there. I appreciate everybody for tuning in live in this episode. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live or tuning in later. Likes are the lifeblood of these algorithms and that affect the streams for these videos, for the channel, for the show. So please, 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 and thank you. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears and put us more front facing on YouTube. So please drop a like on this video, whether live now or listening or watching later. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. I appreciate the support in whatever form or fashion it comes in. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is and how tremendous it is. If you thought the show was terrible, do better with who you are as a person and tell your enemies and try and ruin their day with this show or this episode. As Troy says, hit the like on the way out. Appreciate it. Pop says, much love to Ant in the Tree. I appreciate you folks and all the kind words. Thank you very much to David Harrison for joining me early on to add insight into the schematics of the Commanders team, to talk about this matchup and break down some pieces. Thank you very much to Save a Whale, Ride a Running Back, Jason, Jessica, Dave, and Sophia for your super chats. I really appreciate you folks being here and for the good comments and for the monetary donation as well. So thank you very much, folks. I appreciate you more than you will possibly know. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next week for another episode of Disguise Coverage, live Tuesday, September 26th, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching this live or on Tuesday night or Wednesday afternoon or early evening, I will see you live Wednesday, September 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern for another episode of the Cover One Film Room. We got a ton of amazing stuff to break down. I kept some of it off the table for this episode because I know we're getting into it tomorrow in the film room. So join us for the Cover One Film Room live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern with myself and Eric Turner. Godspeed. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. We'll see you next week. And as always, go Bills.